There is a belief that sits at the center of how most people approach money, and it feels so logical, so reasonable, that it rarely gets questioned. It's the idea that the solution to financial stress, financial limitation, and even long-term financial freedom is simply to earn more. Make more money, and everything improves. Make more money, and the pressure disappears. Make more money, and eventually you will reach a point where you no longer have to worry. But what if that belief is incomplete? What if on its own it is not just ineffective, but quietly keeping you in a cycle that never actually ends? Because the truth is, income by itself does not create freedom. It creates capacity. It creates opportunity. But without a system that converts that income into something sustainable, something independent, something that continues to operate even when you stop, income becomes something you have to constantly chase. And when you are always chasing it, you are always working for it, no matter how high it gets. This is the income illusion. The belief that earning more will eventually solve a structural problem that earning alone cannot fix. And it's powerful because it feels productive. It feels like forward motion. Every raise, every promotion, every increase in income reinforces the idea that you're getting closer. But if the underlying system doesn't change, you're not actually moving toward freedom. You're just moving within a higher version of the same structure. At the beginning, this system feels manageable. You earn, you spend, you save a little, and you repeat. As income grows, your lifestyle grows alongside it, often without conscious intention. You upgrade your environment, your experiences, your expectations. And because those upgrades feel deserved, they are rarely questioned. But each one raises the cost of your life. Each one increases the amount of income required just to maintain your current position. And over time, what started as progress becomes dependency. This is where the illusion deepens. Because from the outside, everything looks successful. Higher income, improved lifestyle, visible signs of progress. But internally, the structure hasn't changed. You still rely on income to sustain your life. You still trade time for money. And if that income stops, the system stops with it. That's not freedom. That's a more expensive version of the same constraint. One of the reasons this pattern persists is because income is immediate. It produces results that you can see right away. You work, you get paid. You increase your value, your income increases. There is a direct relationship between effort and reward. And that relationship is satisfying. It creates a sense of control. But it also creates a dependency on that cycle. Because when your progress is tied directly to your effort, your ability to move forward is limited by how much you can continue to produce. There is also a psychological reinforcement that makes this even stronger. Society rewards income. It measures success through earnings, titles, and visible lifestyle. So as your income increases, you receive validation. You feel like you're doing the right thing. And because of that, there is little incentive to question whether that path actually leads to long-term independence. It feels like it should. But feeling and function are not the same. The deeper issue is that income does not scale in the same way that assets do. Income requires continuous input. Assets, when structured properly, generate output independently. And that distinction is where the entire difference between working indefinitely and eventually stepping away begins. If your financial system is built entirely around income, then your presence is always required. Your time, your effort, your attention, they are all necessary to keep the system running. This is why some of the highest earners still feel stuck. Not because they don't make enough, but because their system has no exit point. There is no transition from active effort to passive support. There is no phase where the system begins to carry itself. So even as income increases, the structure remains the same. And that structure requires continuous participation. At some point, this begins to create pressure. Not always immediately, but gradually. The realization that stepping away, slowing down, or even taking a break has consequences. Because without income, there is no support system in place. No assets generating consistent returns. No margin that allows flexibility. And that realization often leads to working longer, pushing harder, and becoming more dependent on the very thing that is supposed to create freedom. There is also a timing component that is often overlooked. Many people assume they can focus on earning first and figure out the rest later, that they can build income now and transition into investing, asset building, and long-term planning at some point in the future. But that delay comes with a cost, because the earlier years are where compounding has the most time to operate. And if those years are spent only earning and spending, without building assets, the system loses one of its most powerful advantages. Over time, this creates a gap between effort and outcome. You may be working more, earning more, and even feeling more successful, but the long-term trajectory hasn't changed. The system is still dependent on input, and without a shift, it will remain that way indefinitely. Breaking out of this illusion requires a change in focus, not away from income, but beyond it. Income is not the goal. It is the tool. The goal is to convert that income into something that reduces your dependence on it over time, something that begins to operate independently, something that continues to generate value whether you are actively working or not. This is where assets come into play, not as an abstract concept, but as a structural necessity. Assets are what create separation between effort and outcome. They allow your financial system to produce results without requiring constant input. And over time, as those assets grow and compound, they begin to take on a larger role in supporting your life. But this transition does not happen automatically. It requires intentional allocation. It requires choosing to direct a portion of your income into systems that will not produce immediate gratification, but will create long-term leverage. And that is where most people struggle, because it requires delaying visible progress in favor of invisible growth. There is also a shift in how you evaluate money. Instead of asking how much you earn, you begin to ask how much of what you earn is being converted into assets. Instead of focusing on increasing income alone, you focus on increasing the percentage of that income that is working for you. And over time, that percentage becomes more important than the total number. Another important shift is understanding that freedom is not a moment. It is a process. It is the gradual reduction of dependence on income, not the sudden elimination of work. It is the point where your system begins to support you, not because you stopped working, but because you built something that continues to operate alongside your effort. There is also a layer of awareness that becomes critical, recognizing when increases in income are being absorbed rather than leveraged, recognizing when lifestyle expansion is replacing asset accumulation, recognizing when progress is visible but not structural. These distinctions allow you to adjust before the pattern becomes too ingrained. Over time, as these adjustments are made, the dynamic begins to change. Income is no longer the sole driver of progress. Assets begin to contribute. Growth begins to accelerate. And the pressure that once came from dependence begins to ease. Not because income disappeared, but because it is no longer carrying the entire system on its own. Eventually, a point is reached where the output from your assets begins to matter, where it starts to offset expenses, where it provides options. And that is when the illusion breaks completely. Because you realize that income was never the destination. It was the starting point. If you take anything from this, let it be this. Earning more money will not set you free if your system requires you to keep earning it forever. Freedom comes from what you build with that income, not the income itself. If this shifted your perspective, make sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe to Smart Money Compounds. Because here, we don't just focus on increasing income. We focus on turning it into something that eventually replaces the need for it.